I'm going to start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about my life at Taraloka, and I'm going to talk about becoming more of an individual through community life, which is what it's like living and working at Taraloka. And I'm going to start, well, in two places. One was where I left you a few days ago when I told you that I'd lived at Taraloka for 20 years. So I'm going to start by leaving Taraloka. I'm also going to start with a very similar sentiment to Mike Davies' little talk yesterday. So I arrived at Taraloka in December 20, well, I don't know when I arrived, and exactly 20 years later, in December 2014, I was at an order weekend, a women's order weekend at Adistana, and they gave me a rejoicing. The order gave me a rejoicing. So there was 120 Dharmacharinis in the room, and I didn't know it was going to happen. And that was me leaving Taraloka, pretty much exactly 20 days, 20 years to the day. Yeah? And after they'd rejoiced in me, I said, whatever I am the product of community life and Sri Ratna teachings. And I felt that very strongly in a similar way to, I think, Mike Davies' sentiment yesterday, where she said, I am nothing apart from those people around me. I think one of the things you do experience when you're living collectively is that you're being modified a lot by other people in a very positive way. And you can do so much more as part of a collective than standing alone. So that's where I'm going to start. When I stood in front of the women's order that December evening and said, I am a product of community life. And I'm going to give you a little history of how I got there, what I did, but mostly through my life at Taraloka. I mean, you heard a little bit yesterday, those that came to, was it the meditation in the afternoon, where I said I'd had this moment where I realized I needed more input into my life, and I thought, I need to live in a community again. Yeah, there was that moment. So that was the start again of another kind of phase in my life. So I see my path as a gradual development of individuality. And that has happened particularly through living in communities and doing significant solitary retreats when I was a young mitra. So collective and being alone has this combination has really worked itself on me. I started living in a community in Glasgow in 1984 when I was 24. And then I continued for 10 years, and I had a short break in that period. And then I restarted it again when I realized I need more input. So over the last 40 years, which is what it amounts to, 40 years living in a community, I've held a particular vision, and that's the vision of becoming an individual, or becoming a true individual. Not an individual as in I'm a person, because that's already there. It's more like becoming a true individual. In other words, not being driven by by serving the group, but being driven by serving my own kind of values and my own, own values is probably the best way of putting it, my own integrity, but also in relationship to other people. At ordination, I took Shakyamuni. My sadhana was Shakyamuni. So Shakyamuni is like the embodiment of this path, the path of the true individual. You know, one person, a human being, becoming enlightened. And I took that as a kind of hallmark of my life. He started off just like me. I started off just like him. Look what he did with his life. Look what he did. Look what he achieved. I too can achieve that. So this path of individuality is very much at the heart of Sangharakshita's teachings in Triratna. He talks, in many talks, he talks about becoming a true individual. And I love it. I absolutely love it. So the description of it is like you becoming, as an individual, you're growing, you're developing, you have a personality. There's that lovely description of us all growing like plants and becoming different plants. Yeah, some people become oak trees and some people become poppies, but we all grow in our own particular way. In fact, I remember walking into his room one day and him saying to me, "Saddhanandi, we grow more like plants than people realize." And there's something in that. There's something in that. We all just need nourishment, sunshine, the right soil. There's quite a long time ago, I was doing some study and I found this Pali scholar called Peter Harvey. And he has a chapter of one of his books that says, the title is Developing a Self Without Boundaries. So this is interesting in the kind of Pali context because developing the self seems to go against the Anatta teachings, okay? Which, when you talk about individuality, you think you're going against the Anatta teachings as well. Now, this is what he says, one of the lines in his chapter. While self is seen as a baseless concept, this does not preclude the development of a strong empirical self. Indeed, the most developed self is one which is precisely known as selfless and I-less. To develop a fully mature empirical self is, at least in part, to know everything as selfless. In other words, you develop the qualities of individuality by letting go of that self sort of thrusting, that self-assertion that's going on all the time. The Tibetan teachings would say something like, drive all blames into one, which can, just that one line can take you a long way, to be honest. Well, actually, it probably can take you all the way there. Drive all blames into one. So in other words, when you notice something is unpleasant or difficult and you feel like that blame thing comes up, find out where that blame's starting from. Yeah, it'll be starting from a place in yourself which wants things in a certain way. Drive all blames into one. So that's the Tibetan teaching around it. So we've got these two strands: letting go of the grip of self, the attachment to self, and expanding into the positive qualities that a letting go in that sort of way will allow. So I'm going to just talk through a few moments in the community that seemed to sort of indicate this a little bit, yeah? So learning to think for myself. You'd think this was quite straightforward. Everyone thinks for themselves, but you know, often we're so prone to what the press tells us to think, what the media tells us to think, what our parents tell us to think, what the people in the peer group around us tell us to think. We're so prone to all of that. We hardly know what we think. So learning to think for myself. When I've been living in the Taraloka community for about a year, I went to an order weekend in Birmingham. And I was in this group with this really feisty set of women, Dharmacharanis. And I thought, I'm just going to look like the good girl on the block. You know, that horrible moment where you realize, you know, you're the one that's going to look like, you're the one that's going, I know the answer. And then the only answer you know is the one you read in the books, you know, that sort of moment. Yeah. And I thought they're going to see me for what I am, which I suppose is like a group member. You know, I live at Taraloka, I'm the party line, blah, blah, blah. No. I was clear thinking, I had my own integrity, and I had as feisty answers to them as they had in terms of questions. And I thought, okay, living this life is creating a woman of integrity and of ability to think for herself. Yeah. Another aspect of community life is that you have to live with this horrible experience of having an effect on other people. Okay, so this experience of having an effect on other people is sometimes hard to bear at times. You'd think it was just like if you had an uncomfortable, difficult effect on other people, you'd think that was difficult. But actually, sometimes having any effect on other people is difficult. Yeah, even a positive effect, you think, well, that's nice. I'm pleased that that was helpful. I just wish I didn't. I don't know. Can I just have a life without you guys at the moment? You know. So, what does it take to bear the burden of knowing you have an effect? What it means is you've got to take responsibility for yourself. Take responsibility for the effect that you have. And that never really stops. In the supermarket, with your kids, with your community, with your postman. I mean, but we're all having some sort of effect. Yeah? It means growing up. It means facing yourself with a lot of honesty. It means having a lot of metta for yourself and an understanding of yourself, yeah? But not allowing that understanding to become an indulgence. There's a tension when you're living in a community, which is that you're having an effect, and that's hard. That's a hard burden sometimes. And at the same time, you're at home, and you're trying to be relaxed at home, easy. Yeah? That's where we're sometimes at our worst, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got this horrible dilemma, this horrible tension of you're sometimes at your worst, and you're seeing the effect you're having. And you've got to learn how to relax with that, how to relax with that tension, how to relax with the kind of reflecting back that you get. You know, you come into the kitchen under the burden of the moment, you say something rather silly or foolish or whatever, and a person looks a bit hurt or a bit misunderstood, and you've got to weather that, yeah, with a level of understanding for them, for yourself, for the situation. What this means is you're going to have to draw at deeper levels of yourself, deeper levels of metta for yourself. And this is a metta that has wisdom, because actually we're all in the same boat. It's the human situation. I remember when I was quite a young mitra, I was sitting in front of the four-armed Avalokiteshvara, a tanka of the four-armed Avalokiteshvara. And he had these beautiful white hands. And I thought, I don't have white hands. I have blood on my hands. And that is what the human condition is. Yeah, just live it now, live it well. Yeah. I thought all my life up until now, I've been like Lady Macbeth, trying to clean the spot off her hands. The blood is there already. This is the human condition. Now weather it. Yeah, now bear it, monk, bear it. This means a letting go of self-views. It's humiliating and it's freeing. Okay, another moment. I stepped into the kitchen. Quite a lot of things happen in the kitchen. And I said to somebody, a Dharmacharani I was living with, I said, have I become a man? And she said, well, now you've mentioned it, no. And she said, why? Why are you asking me this? And I said, I don't know. I think what it was when you're living in this life, you become less and less gendered. You'd think if you were living in a women's community, you became more like a woman. But actually, you've got more drive, more initiative, more creativity. I ended up with more boldness. And my internal world wasn't what it used to be. And I began to think, I don't know who I am anymore. So I was just you're stepping outside the stereotypes, actually. That's what it is. You're stepping out of the stereotypes of gender. And then I step into the kitchen and say, have I become a man? So yeah, I had a lot of opportunities in my life at Taraloka to take initiative, to have a boldness to my life, to make decisions, to make big decisions, business decisions, decisions about how I lived, decisions that carried impact on other people. So I live my life more androgynous, as an, what's the word? Androgen. Yeah, like more that. Yeah. I live my life more like that. I mean, just rehearse this a little bit. When you walk around Taraloka, walk with the movements of as if you're androgynous, as you know, just move through a world like that. Why not? Like loosen off the stereotypes around being a woman. I think I was also letting go of a kind of inner security and identity. So I didn't know who I was anymore. But androgyny is quite an interesting ideal. Sangharakshita talks about it in the 10 pillars. It's a less polarized way of being in the world, actually. Yeah, we're not caught by the kind of safety nets of gender. Yeah, what would it be like to move through this world with less clinging to gender? Just identify more simply as an individual. Okay, making the right decisions for the right reasons. So living in a community, you find yourself prone to making decisions. And some of the decisions we make reinforce the group. Or sometimes they go against the group. And we're often influenced by that, the decisions we make. Yeah. How do you make decisions that are neither influenced by the group or so totally self-preoccupied? Yeah. What does it mean to do that in dialogue? You know, to find, if you like, the right way to make the right decision. I used to say this a lot. Am I making the right decision for the right reasons? It means letting go of the worldly winds, letting go of pleasure and pain, praise and blame, just letting go of all of that. Again, it's like you have to tap into a deeper level, a more individual place in yourself. You can do this in different ways. You can talk it through with a very good friend, like talk about something you want to do or an opinion that you have, and they can just explore it with you. Or you can do it alone. Either way, you've got to reach a different place where you're no longer caught by the influences of self and other in a way. At the same time, you're taking both into account. This reminds me a bit of a sort of an aloneness aspect of community life. It's the viveka aspect, the renunciant aspect. That sort of forest dweller in a community where you're actually standing more alone in yourself, more alone in your own sort of integrity, actually. So the decisions we make can range from being very small or very large. We learn to let go of continually asserting ourselves, and we also learn to distinguish a real value in ourselves that need attention. And all collective situations, all communities need everyone to bring all their values to the table, as it were. That's how you're creating community. When I was quite a young order member at Taraloka, I made one quite big decision, which had quite an impact on the community. And it created a lot of tension around the place. It might not have been the right decision, or maybe it was, or maybe the way I did it wasn't right, or maybe it was. But it did create quite a lot of tension in the situation for a while. And I think I can say that the community at that time was exemplary. It wasn't a comfortable process. Nobody tried to soothe me. I had to stand within the fact that I'd made this decision and I'd created a tension. So nobody tried to soothe me, and yet nobody was blaming me. Yeah, do you see what I mean? So I was certainly questioned why I'd done what I'd done, but I was left alone in my decision. It reminded me of the poem by the Ancient Mariner, Coleridge, yeah. It reminded me of that, where he shoots the albatross, and the albatross is a sort of good luck token in a way, and he's on this ship and he shoots the albatross is dead, and then the whole ship's in trouble, and all the crew and all the members on the ship turn and look at him because they know he's shot the albatross. And I thought, I've shot the albatross. Yeah. And in that moment, you're standing alone. You're standing alone within the community. You feel the support of people, but there's no reassurance there. It's quite a cold wind. You're supported, but the weather's quite cool. Any insecurity within me wasn't being soothed at that moment. And yet there is support and there is care. It's a very growthful situation. It's bracing. As a piece of weather, it's bracing. Okay, learning respect for the individual and the community. Sangharakshita says, a spiritual community is created out of true individuals or individuals, i.e. a real spiritual community is created out of individuality. He compares it to an omelette. You know this phrase? He says, you can no more have an omelette without cracking eggs. You can no more have a spiritual community without individuals, true individuals. Individuality, he means. Yeah, so a group of individuals, the possibility of being an individual or being more individual, and you're together with others trying to be more individual, is the spiritual community. I do remember once going through the Taraloka kitchen saying, this is supposed to be the drama of cosmic enlightenment, not the next soap opera, by the way. So often the spiritual community or the communities are just another kind of group or another soap opera, and you're trying to rise above that. It can easily fall into a kind of the positive group. At the same time, all of us need to be an individual in that situation, have individuality in that situation. So in this process, I learnt respect. I learnt respect for the individual people involved. I also learnt respect for the community structures and the systems that were in place. Respect is an interesting quality, isn't it? It's a quality of humanness. It kind of, respect depolarizes the situation. In a way, it's a softening between self and other. When you have respect, you're pushing through boundaries. You're pushing through boundaries with safety, and it allows for more intimacy. For many years, I was a neighbour to Ratnashuri, and Ratnashuri was maybe 35 years older than me, and so I was living with her through her 70s and 80s. And one evening I noticed quite late that the light in her room was on. And I thought, she was quite an active lady. And I thought, it's hard to know whether she's just busy doing something or whether she's not. Who knows what she's doing? So I stepped into her room and she was asleep on her bed, fully dressed. And I had a moment where I thought, should I wake her up? It seems a bit weird to wake somebody up to tell them to go to sleep, but that is the dilemma, yeah. But I was a little bit concerned that I was a bit concerned that she would wake up in the middle of the night and be really disorientated. So I woke her up. I'm just describing this as a moment of intimacy, you know, where you can step into somebody's room and wake them up to tell them to go to sleep. That is a moment that you don't do with many people. Yeah. We had a lot of moments like that. Yeah, there was a lovely moment where she kept sort of fainting. She went to visit Bristol where her brother was, and she fainted in the shopping centre, and then She came back and she fainted somewhere else, and she was going to phone the doctor. And I said to her, I went into her room after a few days, and she still hadn't phoned the doctor. And I said to her, "Are you going to call?" And she said, "I just can't, Saddhanandi. I just can't call the doctor." And I said, "No, that's okay. I can do the doctor. I can call him." And then I said, "Is it serious?" And she said, "I don't think so." And I knew absolutely it wasn't, because I had a respect for how she read herself. Yeah. It turned out she was extremely anemic. So she had then 3 blood transfusions to bring her blood up to the right consistency. Yeah. I mean, the doctor just said to her, "I don't know why you're standing up, to be honest." But I'm just trying to say again, that moment of intimacy and sort of understanding of her. Yeah. Then I also remember, no, I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, connecting. In a community situation, you're connecting through insignificant moments and significant moments. So these small moments of care, like me stepping into Ratnashuri's room, chance conversations in the kitchen. These are just connections through a kind of quality of sharing, ongoing sharing, rather than kind of formal arrangements with each other. You know, you don't have to make a date necessarily, it's just what happens in the kitchen. There are also bigger moments, like celebrating somebody's birthday and then taking a call in the kitchen, thinking it's somebody phoning about the birthday. And it's Ratnashuri's son saying that his brother has just been found dead in his bedroom. And I remember taking that phone call and saying in the kitchen, as I walked out the kitchen to go and get Ratnashuri, who was no longer there, "Something's going on," because I hadn't known exactly what was going on. And Parami and Kulaprabha followed me into Ratnashuri's room, and we sat there and waited for the phone to be directed and for her to take that call. You're holding that moment where a mother hears her son has been found dead in his room, and you do the next thing that's obvious. You do whatever's needed in that moment. Yeah. Human life, witnessing each other. Human life, witnessing human life. Months later, Ratnashuri said to me, "If I hadn't had those blood transfusions, Saddhanandi, that would have killed me." I absolutely believed it. Yeah, so at the heart of Taraloka, there is a community. And that community is holding a vision. And a vision has a different aspects to it. Inner aspects, outer aspects, secret aspects. I don't know whether I've got the description right, but I'll just list a few things. Inner aspect is like each person is trying to grow and develop, become more of an individual. And maybe in Tara's realm, becoming more of Tara. Taking responsibility for themselves, becoming more creative and more aware. The outer project is this project, the retreat centre. It's also the women's wing. It's creating depth and intensity in the women's wing. That was part of its vision when it was set up. So Taraloka's got a sort of a place in the overall architecture of the movement. And then there's a secret place, a secret part of the vision. And that is the manifestation of Tara in this world. Manifestation collectively and individually as Tara in this world. Yeah. So in Vasantra's book, he describes Tara like this. I'm just paraphrasing. Encountering Tara's beautiful figure, we are also perhaps experiencing enlightenment in its most accessible form. Tara is very approachable. The lotus on which she sits grows out of a pool on the earth. Tara is enlightenment stepping down to us, reaching out a hand to lift us up. She is the voidness, clothed in its finest raiment. She is the embodiment of transcendental compassion. She is both easily approachable and fathomless, familiar yet beyond understanding. So this is what we're trying to make manifest here in this realm, in this area. So for me, well, we can know that from the inside, but can we see it from the outside? You know, you live in a Buddhist bubble, don't you? And you think, well, if you're a Buddhist, you think, oh yeah, Tara's realm. But to what extent does it get witnessed from the outside? I'll give you a few moments. Coming into the kitchen, again, 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's a big builder who's a bricklayer sitting at our kitchen table. It's 8 o'clock in the morning, and his apprentice son is with him. And I say to him, what are you doing in the kitchen? We didn't know you were coming. And he said, oh, I've got a few things to do. I've got to knock down a wall and build a few things. I said, oh, okay, fine. So he starts having a cup of tea and doing things in the kitchen. And I say to the son, who's not doing anything, can I give you a few jobs? Like move a filing cabinet in the garage? And he said, yeah, fine, I can do that. I've got nothing to do. Take him into the garage. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, my dad's just had his van broken into and all his equipment has been stolen. And it's the second time in the last 3 years that's happened. And that cannot be insured. You see, when you've got a lot of stuff in that situation, it cannot be insured. And he's incredibly low about it. And I haven't known what to do with him. And I said, come on, Dad, what do we need to do? And he said, we need to go to Taraloka. That's one moment. Another moment, which is individual, this is me, not Taraloka, but me carrying the kind of flavour of Taraloka. I got on a train in Birmingham. It was a train that looked like it was going nowhere apart from possibly just round the corner, and I was wanting to go to London. There was one person on it, on the carriage, and I said, is this train going to London? And as I said that, the doors closed on me. And I went, oh. And she said, yes, it is going to London. So I went into the carriage and sat down. And then we got to London, and I got out of the station at Paddington or Euston or wherever it was. And she was there, and she chatted to me. She said, were you all right when the doors closed? And I said, yeah, it was fine. It's all censored, isn't it? You don't get hurt by the doors. And she said, do you live in London? I said, no. I live in a Buddhist retreat centre. And she said, Taraloka. And I said, well, no, actually, I live in Adhisthana now, but I did live in Taraloka for 20 years. And then she said, I knew there was something different about you. And then I'll just tell you one other story, which is a bit more, I don't know whether it's a good story or not. Well, it is a good story, but whether it chimes or not, I don't know. That's a good thing. One more story. I was here leading a retreat with somebody. And I went and had my hair cut around the corner with a woman that cuts my hair around the corner in Cadney Lane. And she said she and her children, her daughters, were going to be attending a funeral at the weekend. And it's because a young girl in the village had taken her own life, 14 years old. And she'd left a note saying, I can no longer live with my thoughts. And I started my retreat like that. And I had I had a number of very young women bearing very difficult burdens. But in my mind, I had this 14-year-old in the village with this note, I can no longer live with my thoughts. And I thought, and she's so close to a centre where we teach how to live with your thoughts well. And I thought, so close and yet still not there. And I called her and called her. And I so wanted her to have access to Taraloka. And meanwhile, I'm doing meditation reviews with some very young women and listening to their stories whilst being very aware of this other woman, this other girl. Years later, the other co-leader of that retreat came to me and she said, "Did I ever tell you what happened?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You left that retreat and I went on to lead the next retreat. And a new team arrived to work with me. And somebody went into your room and said, 'Who's been using this room before us?' And she said, 'It was just Saddhanandi.' And she said, 'This room is full of a young woman.' And I said, 'Good.' She came. Yeah. So she came to Tara's realm. Yeah. So I'm just going to finish with a poem, which is not about Tara and it's not about Tara's realm, but it has a quality of something. I'm going to read you a poem called Gate A4 by Naomi Shabnai. Wandering around Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone is in the vicinity of Gate A4, understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight agent. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her flight was going to be late. She did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haughtily. Shudoa, blah, blah. The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been cancelled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, no, we're fine, you'll get there. Just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him. We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, that they shared 10 friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets that I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering my questions. She'd pulled a sack of homemade mammal cookies, little powdered sugar crumbling mounds, stuffed with dates and nuts from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveller from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same sugar powdery stuff and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my best friend, my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with furry leaves. Such an old country tradition, always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around the gate, that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Thank you. Thank you.